I am Captain Spawn, and this is day 358 of Spawn Year. It's hard not to see this book as a breathing, thinking creature, constantly adjusting its behavior in direct response to mine. Me, its natural-born enemy. It knows it's only a week away from its slaying, and it's desperately trying anything now to wear me down and keep itself alive. As the saying goes, there's nothing more dangerous than a wounded animal, and it's baring all its claws with 212. This has got to be the single most repetitive comic I've read in Spawn Year. Okay, Clown, I get it. Jim doesn't have to be your friend. Okay, Todd, I get it. Bulgy died in issue 100. And what's worse, it's forcing me to repeat myself again, too. How many different ways can I say gorgeous art, abysmal writing? Simon Kradansky is absolutely astounding. How does he read this dreadful material and get inspired to deliver such eye-popping, stunning artwork? I'd like to say his efforts elevate the writing, but the art actually serves only to make the dull and poorly conceived story that much more glaring. Kradansky has found a great balance now between the realistic and the fantastic. The gothic horror and dark myth stuff is epic and breathtaking, and this would have been the perfect issue to bust that aesthetic out on some in-scene action instead of flashbacks and possible futures. But no! We don't get to see the Jim Violator fight promised with last issue's cliffhanger because this is that subtle dialogue-driven horror book now, right? So Jim and Violator stop fighting before we even get into the story again, and Clown insists on taking Jim to a bar to waste another entire issue explaining stuff and drinking beer. They reached a stalemate, and the idea is that Clown wants to take the opportunity to convince Jim that they're still on the same side. But it reads like McFarlane and Carlton are using their supposedly polished and ready for public consumption publication to further suss out the mythology, almost like I'm reading somebody's brainstorming session instead of real narrative. Come on, guys, quit turning in first drafts and try some revision. Once again, a lot of this is stuff I know already, but I have to watch every painstaking second of Jim getting caught up to speed, and I guess what's supposed to be interesting is Clown's manipulations, that he's supposedly only giving Jim as much of the truth as he needs to make him do what he wants. The problem is, A, this is some of the most thinly veiled intrigue I have ever read, and B, there's some new history and mythos here I think is intended for the reader, but because it's being delivered by an unreliable narrator, I don't know what to believe, and I don't trust this book to ever make it clear. Like Jim's muddled characterization and the arbitrary retconning, it's impossible to be sure what's really happening, and that makes almost the whole issue pointless, incessant rambling. Clown, who's taken a more human-looking form, but still has clown markings on his face and looks just as conspicuous as he ever has, tells Jim that Bulgy is after the 7 hidden pieces of his power and that he is hidden one. He says he needs Jim's help because Bulgy wants to extend his empire to the Earth, and if he gets to full power, he'll be able to do that. But he'll also set the world ablaze looking for Clown's piece if he isn't stopped. He says he's done it before, and that's where the phrase scorched earth comes from. Gee, how clever. And that begs the question as to why Bulgy needs any more power if he can already literally set the world on fire in the pursuit of that power. The rules, as usual, are vague and undefined, and yet it's possible it actually makes more sense than this, and Clown isn't telling the whole truth. You see what I mean? A lot of Clown's monologue sounds like nonsense, but it's hard to criticize the logic of it because I don't know what's supposed to be true and what he's making up. And yet it all sounds like the sort of ridiculous I've often been expected to take at face value. For instance, Clown claims to have killed every Spawn who ever lived besides Al Simmons. What? First, that didn't used to be true. Didn't Angela kill some of them? Are we ignoring that she even existed and that any of the stuff she caused to happen happened just because McFarlane's lawsuit with Neil Gaiman prevents him from bringing her up? And secondly, I know Clown has a chip on his shoulder about what he calls half-breeds, human souls merged with demon symbiotes to create hellspawns, and he doesn't conceal that grudge from Jim. I'm glad at least that's still in continuity, but he acts almost as if it was his job to kill them. He says he was charged with testing and training Hellspawn, and that Bulgy would be angry if he saw Clown consorting with, quote, the enemy. How are those two things that go together? It's like tuna fish and chocolate sauce. I mean, I can sort of see Violator fighting spawns constantly to toughen them up and not being buddy-buddy with them, but how are spawns from Hell meant to lead Hell's army, his enemy, professionally? I can see Violator killing spawns to prove to Malbolgia that humans can't cut the mustard, also something that doesn't go with chocolate sauce, but wouldn't Bulgy either at some point make him stop or agree with him and quit making humans hell spawns? I could even see the whole enemy thing if Violator was supposed to prove a spawn's mettle. If Spawn survives against him, he's worthy. But he killed all of them? None were worthy? Then Bulgy is stupider than I ever realized. If it doesn't work, quit doing it. It's like watching a guy try to stick a 2-prong plug in a 3-prong outlet for centuries. According to Curse of the Spawn, he's been doing this since the days of Greek mythology. And besides, didn't Bulgy want the two of them to get along and berated Violator for trying to kill Spawn the first time they fought in the series? That book of canon corrections is getting War and Peace big. But again, that might just be an intimidation tactic, and if so, I've got nothing to complain about. It's just maddening because I already don't know what to take at face value with this book, and I don't really know where the subterfuge is at this point. Clown's told Jim he's a demon, that he doesn't regret killing all the people he's killed, that he wants to rule hell, and has given Jim a pretty persuasive reason to help him. The one being in the universe that could get powerful enough to defeat him wants to take over the world and has to be stopped before he gets that powerful. The only thing Clown is leaving out is that he wants to control Jim to help him take over the world. But he said so much already, that ought to be pretty evident by now. The comic might as well say, "Look kids, deception" on the cover, and I'm supposed to be awestruck by Clown's manipulation skills because that's what it says it's about. The one thing we can be sure of, because it's in a panel that's clearly intended for the reader, is that the mystical seventh piece of power is in Sam. That caused his heart attack, and that's why Spawn couldn't get close to him. I'd be a lot more drawn in by that reveal if it was something one of our main characters figured out, instead of my being totally separate from them and just told plot stuff when McFarlane decides it's time, and if it wasn't such an obvious afterthought. Jim reluctantly decides to keep working with Clown because he needs his answers, and tells Sarah at the end, after Clown instructs him to keep soaking up the public spotlight, that he's going to, quote, change the world. Too bad he isn't just a thoughtful, feeling human being who sees the potential in his powers and tries to enact positive change with them. Of course, it must be part of a selfish scheme to recapture his memories at all costs. Assuming his plan is to heal a bunch more people, which is sure what it seems like. I'm not saying amnesia wouldn't suck or drive a guy nuts, but isn't there a cool angle about trying to use evil to do good here that's far more interesting and that McFarlane isn't taking advantage of? Meanwhile, the Vatican is finally factoring into the story after being introduced a gazillion issues ago. They plan to force Jim to align himself with the church to control him and public opinion, spinning him as the second coming, and if he refuses, to brand him a heretic and try to ruin his reputation. And considering how powerful he is, that's about all they can attack. This subplot is potentially fascinating, and I'm surprised McFarlane is vilifying the Catholic Church as a corrupt, politically driven organization when he was so careful about not stepping on religious toes in the beginning. Some readers might find his depiction unfair or oversimplified, but if played as an exaggerated version for satire, grains of truth in an otherwise obviously absurd depiction, it could be a cool idea. Well, I only have 7 more days of this, so chances are it'll go nowhere before I'm home free. Signed, Captain Spawn.